This podcast is a proud member of the Fan Hub 100. Football without fans is nothing, so we've partnered with Fan Hub to put fans first. Search Fan Hub app to play your part in the journey.
Welcome back once again to another Speak Sunderland Reaction podcast. It is another midweek episode this week as Ipswich and Sunderland have just played each other at the Stadium Light. Sunderland picking up all 3 points. It does leave them at just 4 points from top with a game in hand, just 1 point away from the automatic promotion places.
Joining me this afternoon is the creator of the SAFC Fans React channel on YouTube. A link to this channel will be in the description. Paul, another 3 points yesterday and a few drinks after the game, I would imagine. How are you getting on? You well?
Yes, good. I'm over the moon with the 3 points especially. And yes, I definitely did have a few drinks during and after the game. I felt a little bit rough this morning. But it was worth it. Really good performance, especially the first 35 minutes. I thought was great up until they scored, and then maybe not so good after that, but we might get onto that later, I suppose.
We certainly will. And to get the perspective on the game from an Ipswich supporter, Ace, or better known on social media as TheKitFactor, also joins us. I imagine a lot of people listening to this podcast will already follow him on Twitter. But if you haven't already, I'd highly recommend it. Of course, he was the one who designed the shirts that we have sold through Hope and Glory to raise money for the Bradley Lowry Foundation, which I will quickly add. If you did order one of these shirts, if you check your emails for an update on delivery, you will find an update there. But Ace, forgetting about last night for a little while, how are you getting on?
Well, that's the question. Yeah, trying to forget about last night. It was a weird one, wasn't it? But yeah, I didn't drink last night. I was tempted to do so. I thought maybe I'll be able to referee at League One level after that, but yeah, I've seen a lot of Sunderland fans over the last year or so on my Twitter feed moaning about the state of refereeing, and I've constantly chipped in saying it's just as bad down here. But I think you guys have to accept now that we've definitely had the rough deal of it overall. I think they're diabolical most weeks, but yeah, I mean, I think a draw would have been a fair result last night. I don't think we were particularly great, and I think you guys were probably worse, to be honest. But it was I think we get decisions given against us every week. I think everybody from a fan's perspective, is irate with the referee, even, sort of if a neutral would say they've done nothing wrong. But I do think, there was a couple of big decisions last night that, we've had similar in the past and not, been given against opposition. So it's a little bit hard to take. But yeah, you have to go back to the old adage of it evening out over the course of the season. I very much doubt it will, because I don't think we'll be good enough to get the rub of the green. But that's another matter entirely altogether.
Yeah, we will get on to the refereeing decisions and the match in general a little bit later on. But last night's game was the 10th of the season for Sunderland in the league. 6 wins, 3 draws and 1 defeat for Phil Parkinson's side. Paul, again, we will get into the performance and the game in further detail. But in general, given how tight it is at the top and the results that are happening around us, just how important do you think it was for Sunderland to pick up the 3 points last night?
Yeah, I think for both clubs it was very important. They both wanted the 3 points massively. At this stage in the season, it's good to get as many. I mean, any stage of the season it's good, but I think especially now at the moment, I still see a lot of fans complaining about Parkinson. They're not happy with him. Maybe they're not liking his style of play or the way a lot of them are complaining about how late he makes his substitutions. But you can't really fault where we are in the league and the points and the amount of clean sheets we're getting. And even like sticking with the likes of Wyke, a lot of people weren't happy with that. And it's sort of working. So Parkinson is doing something right. He's seeing playing. I think also.
Yeah. The game yesterday on Twitter, you didn't sound particularly confident of getting a result, I think it's fair to say. And, looking at the form Ipswich have been in recently, I could kind of see why. Obviously, you've got 1 goal against Crewe, 1 against Gillingham. I don't think you scored all against Lincoln, and then another 1 goal game against Doncaster in a 4-1 defeat. Not to remind you about that one, but obviously you still find yourselves up at the top end of the table. But for some reason, a lot of fans still don't seem convinced. But what have you made of Ipswich's start of the season?
I think the concerning thing for me is, I'm probably going to come across as incredibly pessimistic, whereas, I think, to be perfectly honest, I think, I'm quite realistic about our prospects. There's been seasons over the last 10, 15, 20 years where I've been confident. There's been ones where I've not been so confident. And, generally, I think, most fans have a reasonable feeling, with the exception probably of Wycombe fans going into the start of last season. But I think what happened last year and what seems to be happening again this year, and I think there's a lot of parallels between Ipswich and Sunderland, in terms of the, perhaps the quality of the performances for the, the perceived squad on paper, the managers seemingly, not being particularly well loved by the, the fans, but always seemingly, sort of getting a result from somewhere to kind of carry on a little bit longer. Last season we started with 8 wins and 3 draws. We were, obviously top of the league. I think 7 points clear at one stage. Sort of by some similar sort of stages of last season. But the performances were pretty poor. And this season we started off playing, some nice football, but very slow to build up. Kind of giving the opposition lots of opportunity to get behind the ball. And we just seem to be one of those sides that we've got some decent players, but it feels as if the manager is holding us back, and he's not particularly competent. And you see, begrudgingly, the likes of Steve Evans, what he gets out of a Gillingham side. Crew absolutely played us off the pitch last week. For the first 45 minutes with the sort of football that we used to play, under George Burley, about 15, 20 years ago when we were, at the top end of the championship with yourselves. It just seems to be, really poor football. That this year, we've had some nice little spells in individual games, but over the last few weeks, we've had back-to-back defeats at Doncaster and Lincoln, like we did last year. We lost, I think it was to Rotherham and then Accrington, to end that sort of unbeaten run we had. And from there, we had very similar performances to what we've just had, the 1-0 wins over Gillingham and Crewe, where first half Crewe could have been out of sight, and in the second half against Gillingham, who, one of the local team had seen down Portman Road for some time, Gillingham had 3 or 4 clear-cut opportunities in the second half to take the lead before we scored. And we've been a lot more, in terms of our performances, probably typical of the first 15, 20 minutes last night, where, we couldn't lay a glove on you. And then we kind of settled into the, passing the ball around quite nicely. But until we scored, just before the break, I don't think we'd had a shot. And that seems to, be us really. Lots of nice sort of slow passing, lots of possession, but absolutely, nothing in terms of cutting edge from the strikers. And I think, what we've had with Hawkins, he sounds a little bit like what you guys have had with Wyke, in the sense that you don't see a threat constantly. But the manager seems to like him, and we look a worse team, when we had, Hawkins out of the side. But he's only scored his first goal recently. We'd gone 9 games or whatever without a striker scoring. So again, I think there's, by the looks of it, parallels with the struggles you guys have had with, Grigg not really hitting the form that he hit at Wigan, and Wyke not doing what he was doing at Bradford.
Yeah. And we will have a look at the teams that started the game last night, and we will start with Ipswich. Thomas Hawley started in goal. A back line consisted of Stephen Ward, Mark McGuinness, and there's always one player in the opposition team who I cannot pronounce. I'm going to try it. Aristotle Enciala. Is that a good attempt?
Close enough, yeah. I mean, he's just called Toto Enciala, so I think the Aristote bit kind of gets left out. So, but apart from that, it's pretty spot on.
Proud of that one. And Luke Chambers, who also made part of the defensive line. Teddy Bishop, Andre Dezelle, Dion Edwards, Alan Judge, Caden Jackson, and Jank Lancaster. Ace, were there any changes made yesterday for the starting 11 that you were surprised about? I know you briefly touched on Ollie Hawkins there, and I know a brief look through Twitter where there was a few Ipswich fans questioning why he was dropped after getting his first goal.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one for me. I mean, last year there was a phrase that was bandied about called Lamb Bingo, where we used to try and guess the 11 players, and if you got 3 or 4 of them, you'd be doing pretty well, because the biggest criticism of Lambert last year was the wholesale changes. I mean, even last year we drew 0-0 at home with Wycombe in a top of the table clash. Thomas Hawley played brilliantly, saved a penalty, dropped the next game for Will Norris. So. There were some very strange decisions this year. In fairness, he kind of said nice and early that players would keep the shirt if they were playing well. And by and large, they have. We've only really seen rotation in the last, couple of weeks where it's been the whole, sort of Tuesday, Saturday.
Yeah.
I think the biggest, thing for us last night before the match was Luke Wolfenden having to self-isolate. That was a bit of a blow because I think most Town fans, and I think the jury's still out on McGuinness because he's a young player that we signed from Arsenal who's only played a couple of league games, but he's looked excellent so far. Wolfenden last year, him and Flynn Downs were the two, best players in that team by an absolute mile. So to start the season with Wolfenden out of the team, and Enciala and Wilson at the back, and then a couple of games ago they were both dropped for McGuinness and Wolfenden to come in. So it's a bit of a shock last night to obviously see Wolfenden's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. Fortunately, there's a bit of a break in the league because we played the Blackpool game earlier in the season, but with a kind of rearranged fixture. So. Yeah, I think at the moment the the kind of forward positions seem to keep changing. 1 week Sears is in, 1 week is Judge. Lancaster's been in and out. We keep getting midfielders sent off, which obviously doesn't help the midfield free. But it was strange for me that sort of, as I said, Hawkins, we look a much better team when he's in the side without him, necessarily looking a goal threat. But then he gets his first goal on Saturday, and sort of immediately after that, he was pretty much taken off, which seemed a strange one as well at the time. And as much as Caden Jackson did last year, and he's a really decent player at this level in a two. His first touch is pretty poor. His heading ability is non-existent. So to play him as a kind of central striker in that system, where ultimately we needed the man there to hold the ball up, did seem a bit of a strange decision last night. So the team was roughly as expected, but I wasn't quite sure it really worked initially until we got the midfielders in the game.
Yeah. Sunderland lined up like this with the one change from the win against Gillingham on Saturday. Keep losing track of the days with how many football is being played. But Lee Burge started in goal once again. Luke O'Nien as the right wing back. Conor McLaughlin, Bailey White and Tom Flanagan as the three centre halves. Denver Hume was at left wing back. Ledbetter played his role protecting the back three. Josh Scowen kept his place in the side. Gooch was still on the side. Chris Maguire replaced Aidan O'Brien, who was dropped after what was a poor performance against Gillingham. And Charlie Wyke started up top once again. Paul, Chris Maguire came back into the side, replacing O'Brien, as I've touched on there. He didn't perform midweek. But looking back at the team, is that the team you would have started with against Ipswich, or would you have tinkered it slightly?
No, that is exactly the team I was hoping he would put out, to be honest with you. I much prefer having Maguire on the pitch. He can just produce something out of nowhere sometimes. I think we should always start with him whenever possible. Yeah. And I was also glad to see Power having a break the last couple of games as well. It takes a lot for the manager to drop the captain. Yeah. But I think it's working really well. I love having Bailey Wright as the captain. He just suits the role perfectly. And I do think he makes a difference in the squad being captain. So yeah, the rest of the team is exactly how I would have picked it. I was over the moon with it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, the game got underway, and for the first time in quite a long time, really, Sunderland seemed to start the game very well. And 8 minutes in, they got the reward for it. Lyndon Gooch received the ball and he's played a great through ball through to Charlie Wyke, who again finished very well past Hawley, and I think that's his 5th goal of the season. And again, whilst he certainly had his critics, I don't think anyone is questioning him currently starting the games now. But Paul, after the start of the season, none of our strikers were getting goals. It's good to see one of our strikers at least starting to get on the score sheet regularly now.
Yeah, definitely. I think, most fans, not all fans, but most fans were disappointed that Wyke was getting regular starts, but he is slowly starting to turn a lot of heads. Mine as well. I mean, I wasn't slagging him off, but I wasn't too impressed with him getting regular starts over the likes of Greg, who I thought would have been a better option at the time. But you can't knock him. He's doing what he's being asked of. He's getting in better positions. He seems to be, I don't know, he just seems to be a bit more. He seems to have a bit more energy, and he's just doing things better than he was. So yeah, I'm over the moon with Wyke. I'm glad any player proven us wrong. It was the same with Grant Ledbetter. Before the season started, I was a bit dubious about him getting regular games, but he's proved us wrong as well. So yeah, over the moon with Wyke, and hopefully it continues.
Yeah, and I asked Michael this at the weekend, and I think his response was interesting, and I'll ask you the same. If Charlie Wyke was signed in the summer just gone, and this was his first season, do you think he'd still get the criticism from some of the fans that he gets, or do you think the criticism is solely based on, the previous 2 seasons at the club?
Yeah, it's based on the length of time he's been at the club and his sort of goal ratio, which isn't very good. It's not. I mean, I think it was like the first 40 games or something. It's. I can't remember the ratio now, but it wasn't very good. So fans definitely have the right to be critical of him, but they also should sort of send him a little bit of praise when he is doing well, I think. And he is doing well. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and he's getting the goals. And I've always said, a striker's main job in a team is to score the goals. And that's what he should be judged on. And like I say,
Exactly.
I think that might be 4 games in a row now he's got a goal, I believe.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
He's getting the goals, and long may that continue. But Ace, given the lack of goals Ipswich have scored in the recent games, obviously one against Crewe, one against Gillingham and so on, at 1-0 down, did you have any faith of actually winning the game?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I think it's born out of 2 things. I mean, we don't have the best record in recent seasons of coming from behind. There's been a couple of games where we have, but by and large, we're not one of these teams that tends to go behind and then kind of looks as if they've shifted up a gear. But I think that the most concerning thing about last night, once we went a goal down, was as I think I mentioned to you on Twitter beforehand, the record that we had last season against the the kind of top 6, top 8 clubs was absolutely abysmal. There was no kind of getting around that, and even this season, when you look at the table, it kind of starts to settle. I mean, it looks like you guys have played a few of the teams like Peterborough, ourselves that are up there. The only kind of challenges we've from last night, which we lost again, was probably going to Lincoln, as a sort of early top of the table clash, which we also contrived to lose. And I think Doncaster, who are one of those teams that are probably going to be somewhere below the the top 6, top 8, in that kind of top 10 area. We were comprehensively beaten there as well. So as soon as we went 1-0 down, I didn't see that coming. But once we scored, kind of out of nowhere, really, I thought we controlled the game pretty much, from then on and until the end. And even towards the end, we looked weirdly with 10 men as if we could still manage to get something. But I think that was probably more my heightened awareness of how you guys perceive Sunderland exactly the way I perceive Ipswich. You were all sitting there, expecting somehow Sunderland to concede and blow the lead, which is exactly what I'd have been doing in your situation as well. So I think that was probably where my confidence came from, that it was you, and I knew that you were just as pessimistic as I would have been in your shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. The first half wasn't the most exciting game of football, I think it's fair to say, and it was 5 minutes to go until half time again. I think game management, that's where it needs to come in, but Sunderland just didn't. 5 minutes to go until half time. Edwards found space on the left wing. He played a ball into Lancaster in the middle, who smashed the ball through Burge, really. I think I said at the time, it looked a bit poor positioning from Burge, and, it wasn't a very strong hand. But defending was poor as well. McLaughlin wasn't close enough to his man. But Lancaster got the goal, and Paul, once again, it was a disappointing time to concede. But up until that goal, were you happy with the way Sunderland were performing?
Yeah, I was. I mean, obviously, we're not playing at any sort of decent level in terms of what if we win the Championship or the Premiership, we'll be struggling big style. But it's still nice to see us playing half decent against a good team. The goal itself, I think I've only seen the one angle that was obviously through the stream, and it looked to me as if Burge did sort of get his fingertips and it sort of hit off the post and in. That's pretty much how I see it. It was hit with a lot of power, so I don't think it was a great deal. Maybe a stronger hand, yes, but I don't think it was. You can't really knock him too much for that goal. As you say, it was pretty bad defending. But yeah, conceded 35 minutes into the game. It's not a good time to concede, especially when once we do concede, we just sort of drop off and let Ipswich play a bit better, come towards us. Yeah, so not good.
Yeah. And it was an assist for Edwards yesterday for Ipswich, who, in fairness, I think he was fairly quiet last night. But, so far this season, he's got a handful of goals. I think he's got 5 in the league, and he's got a few assists as well. Ace, how important do you think he is to the Ipswich side and, the promotion hopes?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I mean, he's weighed in with the goals. I mean, he seems to be quite unpopular with a section of town fans for some reason. To be a kind of bit of a like you guys were saying with Wyke and how he's ultimately judged, on past seasons and his overall contribution rather than what he's doing now. We signed him under Paul Hurst when we were, in the Championship the season we went down. And he scored, on his debut, I think about 5 minutes in at home against Blackburn. Came up with an outrageous bit of skill, down the flank where he kind of flicked over this guy's head backwards and sort of spun away. And, we're thinking, what a player. And it was a pretty poor season, but I think Edwards still chipped in with like 5 or 6 goals, which may have been top scorer or, sort of second top scorer. But he's one of those players, a bit like the much maligned Finidi George that we had the year we went down in 2002, who scored 9 goals in the Premier League in a relegation season, but did absolutely nothing throughout the game. No defensive work. He was completely anonymous, and then he just seemed to pop up with a moment of brilliance somewhere. Edwards, for me, does a lot of the dirty work. He gets back. He was played last season at wing back, which wasn't his position. He started a lot of games this season on the right, the front three, which isn't his preferred position. But when he's played on the left-hand side, like he did last night, and at Blackpool and a few of the other games, he's come up with goals. So I think we are a team that doesn't have a lot of sort of attacking threat over the last season or two. I mean, Bishop's weighed in with a fair few goals this season, which has been brilliant. But from Bishop and sort of Edwards, they do appear to be the only sort of 2 consistent attacking threats we've got. So. I think it's great to see them both in form at the moment. I think the concern is always if one of them stops scoring, where the goals are going to come from at the moment.
Yeah. Well, half-time arrived at 1-1, and at half-time Parkinson did make an early change, which was a surprise, albeit it was an enforced change. Josh Scowen went off with what I believe was concussion after he was hit in the face with a pretty ferocious free kick. But he was replaced by Max Power, who was sporting a new lockdown haircut, I suppose. But just a couple of minutes into the second half, Ipswich had the ball in the Sunderland box, and the ball passed by Lancaster, who at the time looked to have been brought down by Bailey Wright. Nothing was given, and I can't really remember if the Ipswich players made much of it, but I haven't had the chance to watch it back at the time. But Ace, for you, I think you said it was a Stonewall penalty. Have you been able to watch it back yet?
I have, yeah. I mean, I think the problem that we suffer from, the luxury we had in days gone by was match of the day. I don't know if you remember being in the Premier League. I just don't remember it. But yeah, now when you've got iFollow and you've got a single camera from about 300 miles away, it's a little bit difficult to say, with any certainty. But yeah, I mean, it certainly looked as if your guy made the attempt to kind of block it and slid in and just caught him. But I think the issue that we had is Lancaster was in the position where it looked as if he could still potentially get shot away, and it's sort of almost in 2 minds. I think if he'd have, just committed to going down, which you don't like to see, then I think we'd probably get a penalty there. But I think there was the fact that he kind of didn't go down particularly convincingly that maybe made the referee wonder whether he slipped or not. But I mean, it certainly looked a penalty to me. But it's one of those ones, like I say, because of the angle. It could be there was absolutely no contact whatsoever, and I'm just sort of looking at it from our perspective.
Yeah, and Paul, obviously, it's just said there, you get one view, you get one angle, and that's pretty much it. And you've kind of got to go off what people say at the time. But for you, if you remember the incident, of course, do you think Sunderland kind of got away with that one?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything he's just said there. It's hard to tell going off that one angle. I've watched it a couple of times, and it's one of them ones. It could have been given, and it might not have been given. It's just luck of the draw sometimes with the referees. I think it's a very inconsistent. That's what I'm going to mention later on when we talk about the other end. Yeah, I can't see it for definite. I think we could have had a little bit of an escape there. Yes.
Yeah. 68 minutes on the clock, and Parkinson made another change, and it was again. I've always questioned some of his substitutions, and I questioned the one he made yesterday again, and ultimately we've won the game. So in hindsight, it doesn't really matter. But Chris Maguire came off, and he was replaced by Danny Graham, which means now we had two target men up front and no one to really create anything for them. But Paul, for you, was that a weird substitution, or do you think that actually changed the game in a positive way?
Yeah, I don't like to see Danny Graham and Wycombe together, to be honest with you. For me, they're very similar in terms of they're tall, they're not very fast. I would have kept it as it was, to be honest with you. Or maybe brought Diamond on, had a bit of pace added to the team. I definitely wouldn't have brought Danny Graham on, and I don't think it helped us for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and just going back a little bit, obviously Max Power replaced Josh Scoren at half time, and Scoren is more of an attacking midfield. He will link the attack, and he will get into the box as we did see against Gillingham. Dan Neil, obviously still not involved in the squad. Do you think he would have been a lot more suited to that role if Parkinson had let them out the closet?
Definitely. I think that's basically what I've just said there with Danny Graham and Wyke. I also feel the same way when it comes to Ledbetter and Power. I don't like to see both of them on at the same time, and I think Ledbetter is a better player than Power at this moment in time. So Dan Neil, he showed some promise and some good signs during pre-season. I would definitely have him on the bench at least and ready to play 20, 25 minutes in a game like that. It switches things up completely. It injects that pace again. Like I say, if we had Diamond and Dan Neil come on, Ipswich are not going to be aware of what they're capable of doing, and they're going to have some pace running at them. So yeah, I would have done that definitely.
Yeah. And 4 minutes after the Chris Maguire change, where Danny Graham came on, similar to Gillingham, the game changed completely. The ball was in the centre circle. Andre Dizelle and Ledbetter were looking for the ball. Dizelle's went in, and the referees blew for free kick, and pretty much straight away brandished the red card. At the time, I wasn't even particularly convinced it was a foul. I've seen a few images on Twitter that paint a different image of the incident, and again, still images are never reliable to go on. They always make things look worse, just like slow motion does. But you have to remember the referee gets one view and one view only in real time. But I'm personally still undecided as to whether it was a red card. But Ace, red card for you?
It's again a difficult one. I mean, my initial reaction was that we were going to get a free kick because of the shove on Dizelle, and then it was it took me sort of half a second to realize. I think it's one of those. I don't think Dizelle's kind of reputation comes into it, because I think I'd be giving League One referees far too much credit to say that they know a particular amount. He has made a couple of silly sort of naive challenges in past games where he's been a little bit lucky, but. Again, for me, it seems weird coming on here, and when you get somebody who's on here for the first time and they start going on about three major decisions and suggest they all should have gone their team's way, you probably don't come across in a particularly great light, do you? But I thought, to me, what happened, and again, like I say, some of the images on Twitter look terrible, but I sit quite near the front of the stand that I'm in at Portman Road. And I see, a lot of tackles that happen in the penalty area in the box, and they look one thing, and then when you later see images on Twitter, they look, horrendous or completely innocent or whatever. So, I think for me, what seemed to happen was Dizelle kind of lost control of the ball a bit, and to me, it looked as if he put his standing foot down towards where Ledbetter was, and then he got a nudge in the back. And I think the mistake he then made is he kind of, as he got nudged towards the ball and he had 1 foot planted, I think he tried to still kind of get the ball. Rather than just go over the foul. And I think the problem he's then got is to the referee, like you say, he gets one look at it. It looks as if he's gone in with both feet, because, they're kind of both in quite an unusual position. If you've not dived into the tackle like that, you naturally wouldn't have both feet, kind of together like that. So I think, coupled with the reaction of the Sunderland player, I think you're always going to be worried then that as soon as he sort of walked off and went to get a card out, I was like, no, he's going to be a red card. But no, I don't think it was a red card in the context of some of the other challenges that I think went on and unpunished. And I think there were a lot from both teams that could have been yellow cards, in the first 40-50 minutes that he just seemed to be quite happy with. But I'm sure you guys have noticed as well, you get games, don't you, where referees, it's like a switch comes on, they let, headbutts go and punches go, and, people come on with baseball bats and chainsaws, and that's all fine. And then you reach a point in the game where, anything, just yellow card. And it's just like the inconsistency is baffling. So, I think it was one of those, if the referee doesn't see him lunging with 2 foot, I don't think he should give it. But, I can also understand that they're under pressure that, if he does get that wrong, then, it changes the game in our favour, doesn't it? But for me, I think it was a bit soft.
Yeah. And obviously you've mentioned there the reputation that players have, and I think Sunderland used to have one of the best players to kind of put in that perspective in Lee Cattermole. He was, at least in the early stage of his career, he was a hard tackler, and, a lot of the tackles that you were putting in were bad fouls. And towards the end of his career, he'd go in, he'd put a great tackle in, but because it was Lee Cattermole, the referee would see that, he'd send him off. And I think the same thing kind of happened with Max Power for us. I think it was our first season, League One, Paul. I'm not sure if you remember, but I think there was 3 times he was sent off, and I think all 3 of them actually got overturned.
Yeah, that's right. And we never really get to see what the referee sees. And obviously, what he said there, he said about them being inconsistent is 100% true. But yeah, I don't. With regards to that one during the game with Ipswich, when I first seen it, I thought, yeah, it's a foul. I didn't think you'd get a red card. I thought maybe a yellow. But I always do this whenever there's a tackle. I don't know if it's just the Sunderland bias. I always automatically think foul, even when it sometimes isn't. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it's the same with the it looked like Debbie Hume got an elbow at one point in the face. I thought that maybe could have been a yellow. But we're just seeing, I mean, I've got a 40-inch TV. That's not very big. You know what I mean? So if I had a 70-inch TV, I might be able to give a better reaction to these fouls. But yeah, to be honest with you, I can see why it was given, but at the same time, if I was an Ipswich fan, I'd feel pretty hard done by with that.
Yeah. Well, Ipswich did find themselves down to 10 men, and for them, I think at this time a point was looking to be the result that they would kind of take at this stage. And in the grand scheme of things, I think that's probably what both sides deserved from the game. But again, the referee was focus of attention. 5 minutes to go until full time, which was the exact same timing as the penalty we received against Gillingham, I believe. One of the Ipswich defenders, I'm not sure who it was, but he's cleared the ball and he's ended up hitting his own player who was a yard away from him, looking away from the ball, and he's trying to get out the way of the ball. But with no hesitation, the referee's pointed to the spot, and it's a weird one. For me, in no game of football ever should that be given as a handball. He's a yard away. He's got no chance of moving out of the way of the ball. But, given this stupid handball rule that's been introduced into football recently, I can see exactly why it was given. Ace, do you think that's a fair way of putting it? Or do you still think, even with the new handball rule, that was a harsh handball to give?
To be honest, I mean, I remember the whole stuff with Eric Dyer and the Spurs fans being sort of up in arms about the rule and stuff. But I'm one of these. It's unfortunate, but when there's a rule that's brought in, and whether it's VAR, whether it's goal line technology, whatever it is, and we all as football fans disagree with it. At least, if it's applied consistently with the way that it's laid down, you can have a little argument. You might disagree with the rule, but, at least you understand that the referees are there to do a job and they're there to enforce the rule, no matter how, sort of silly that we might think it is. But I think the issue that I had with it is when we played Blackpool a few weeks ago, and I think there was one a couple of weeks before that at home to Rochdale as well. There was one penalty that we would have had under the new handball rule, and one penalty I think that Blackpool would have had, and both of them weren't given. And it was like as if the rule that the Premier League clubs have been sort of complaining about didn't exist. And I watched the games at home with my dad, and we both sort of turned around and said, well, fair enough, they've evened out, and at least we've not got this stupid rule that the Premier League clubs seem to have. The referees are looking at it, and if it's an intentional handball, they're giving it, and if it's not. So I understand if we're talking about League One and the fact that everybody's following the same rule, but we've seen two referees this season that have interpreted it probably the way as football fans would want it to be interpreted, which is ultimately deciding whether the players made a deliberate attempt or not. And the one that we should have had against Rochdale, the guy's arm was in an unnatural position. He kind of put his arm out to block the path of the ball, and it was clearly done in order to but you go back to say, okay, that's the referee's interpretation that he's not meant it. The thing that was kind of galling about last night is both that, the fact that the rule hasn't been applied consistently. And as you say, the fact that, what's happened is your guys headed it back into the box. McGuinness has tried to clear it away. And as he's, sort of swiveled to hit it, I think he's seen Nziala's head come in. So he's kind of pulled his foot away. And because he was swiveling his body as if he was, kind of trying to do like one of these old Mark Hughes over the head, over the shoulder volleys, his arm's been out, and then Nziala, like you say, has just headed it straight against his arm from, a yard away. And I think McGuinness has probably gone down, holding his face.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Whether that hit his arm, then his face, I don't know. Or whether that's convinced the referee that, hang on a minute, I don't know what I've seen here, but it didn't hit his face. And so maybe his reaction, kind of made the referee's mind up. But as you say, it's just one of those where, you shouldn't really be given penalties for unintentional, somebody hitting the ball from behind you against the back of your arm when you're not even looking. But I'd have no problem with it if like I say, the Rochdale and the Blackpool games, the referee had also said, look, your arm's out, it's hit your arm, that's a penalty, that's the new rule, then I'd have no complaints about last night. But again, as you guys have both said, it's the inconsistencies, and it's the fact that even in League One, the referees from one week to another don't seem to know which rule they're supposed to be enforcing.
Yeah. And Paul, for you, what's your thoughts on the handball rule in general? Because obviously, the way that it is being implemented into the game now is somewhat easier. It seems to be more like if it hits your arm, if it hits your hand, it's a handball. But there's so many in the Premier League. Obviously, the one yesterday, the player's not looking at the ball. He has no way of getting out of the ball. He's completely unaware of it.
Yeah.
Do you think decisions like that are, I'll say, ruining the game? But do you think they're harsh?
Yeah, I do. I think obviously there's nothing that guy could have done to get out of it. There's no intent at all. The team's being punished because of something that was beyond their control. So for me, that rule should be changed somehow. Even though it's clearer and it makes it easier to understand, it makes it unfair, in my opinion. Yeah. And especially with, like Ace is saying, all fans want is consistency. If it counts as a penalty in that game, it should count as a penalty in every game.
Yeah.
So for me, if I was an Ipswich fan, I would have been gutted that was given, and it shouldn't have been given. But if you look at the rules, it is definitely a penalty. So some of the Ipswich fans I've been speaking to were saying it's not a penalty. If you're going off the rules, it is definitely a penalty. So yeah, it's a hard one to take, and I can understand them being sort of angry about it. But yeah, it's definitely a penalty in my opinion.
Yeah. And Ace, quickly again on the handball rule, what do you think could be changed to it to kind of make it more fair to the defending teams? Because obviously there's no intent to play to handle ball there. He's trying to clear it out of the box up until the Sunderland half. He's not going to try and block that with his arm there, so that's not intentional. But at the same time, you see some in the Premier League where the player's standing on the line, the ball hits his arm. If it doesn't hit his arm, it goes in, but they don't even get given. What for you do you think should be changed for the handball rule?
To be honest, I didn't have an issue with the rule as it stood for the last God knows how many years. I think the issue we've got is that I understand certainly with I think the goal line technology has been fantastic. I think most people can agree, apart from maybe the Villa Sheffield United game last year. But in terms of as we've seen in the Championship and League One, it's certainly the Championship. Sorry, the ball goes over the line. The referee's watch vibrates. Everybody knows that it's gone over. You'll see the replays if it's a kind of Sky game or whatever, or an iFollow, and there's no kind of doubt there. And I think the problem is they seem to be looking for ways to bring all the other rules in line with the kind of there can be absolutely no debate about it. And I think the problem that you've got with the handball rule is, like you said, it is much clearer now. If it hits somebody's hand, it's a penalty. Like in the Premier League, as you say, when you see it, flick off somebody's arm in the build up to a goal, and the goal's disallowed. Everybody knows where they stand. But for me, the game's poorer because I think again, it works well, and there's always going to be ones that linesmen miss or referees miss or whatever. But I think you're in a much better place when you're making the decision as a referee or as an assistant in terms of intent. Rather than, like you say, just a winger being able to drive into the box and see a bloke's got his hands down and go, right, okay, I've got nothing on here in the box, so let's just slam it against his hands and, see if I can win a penalty. That to me, ultimately, whilst it may be a rule, just, kind of, I don't think that's what most of us want to see. And I think, there was nothing wrong with the system when it was just judging, whether it was a deliberate handball or not. And I think, most of the time that was right. There's always going to be ones that go amiss, but I think generally, that was fair.
Yeah. Well, the penalty was given, and Ledbetter stepped up to take it, and once again he's dispatched it very well, and that was the game really, a 2-1 win, and it wasn't a pretty game, it wasn't a particularly good performance, but points get you promoted at the end of the day, and at the minute we are picking them up. At the time, and at the end of the game, I said a draw would have probably been a fair result, and I don't think either side really did much or did enough to actually win the game, and I don't think either side showed the real quality, especially in the final third. But Ace, for you, do you think a draw would have been a fair reflection?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we obviously had the best chance to probably win it outside the penalty with the one that Lancaster put over the bar. But I think you guys had a couple of chances in the first half as well. So I think ultimately it was two teams on paper that should be doing a lot better. producing a fairly sort of drab, unexciting match, devoid of, kind of quality and chances. And I'd have taken a point before the game. I'd have certainly taken a point once we went down to sort of 10 men. I think that, ultimately would have been a fair result. But as you said, the penalty under the rules is a penalty. It's given. It's been converted by Ledbetter, another one of our former players who did absolutely nothing from set pieces for us for God knows how many seasons, and alas, steps up and tucks the penalty away. So yeah, I think the most frustrating thing from our point of view is that we've been in so many of these situations against the likes of Sunderland, Peterborough, Coventry last season, Rotherham, whoever it is, and been completely outclassed. And I think we felt that last night, for probably 2/3 of the game, we were slightly better, and the game was potentially there for the taking. So I think that's the most frustrating thing, to not come out of that game with a point, is that it was one game against a so-called promotion rival where we actually held our own rather than capitulating and looking sort of very poor and second best.
Yeah, and after the game, I said this on Twitter, and I think it's fair to say it got mixed reactions. But we're 10 games in, and for me, I'm still not fully convinced. Results are coming in, and that's great. But I feel like from the start of the season, up until now, we've been riding our luck quite a lot. Obviously, a penalty last night won the game. A penalty at Gillingham midweek arguably won the game, and again, penalty at Peterborough won the game. And once that luck does run out, I don't personally think I've seen enough from the Sunderland performance to suggest that we are capable of, continuing the winning run. Paul, do you think that's a fair way of putting it, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's just we're not performing very well, but we're getting the results, as you say. So, is there many teams sort of better than Ipswich that we're going to be playing?
Yeah, about eight or nine of them, I'd say.
Pessimistic coming into play.
Yeah, but we've played the games we've played. I mean, we've played some decent teams already, and we've getting some results. Some teams that you'd expect to be up there around us. So it's a hard one, because I think I've said before when I was on here that we do tend to play a little bit better against the better teams, but that isn't always the case, as Charlton proved. So yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know. I think I was happy with. Oh, sorry, I wasn't happy with. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm never happy. I'm never happy with the draw, but I think I would have took the draw before the game kicked off. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm in two minds with that one.
Yeah. I think one of the worries for me is when you look at the teams around us, you've got Lincoln, you've got Peterborough, and when they're winning games because they're outplaying their opponent. They're scoring goals from open play. They're getting plenty of shots on goal. And if you look at Sunderland games, Sunderland have won. Again, I've touched on it there. We've been awarded a dubious penalty yesterday. They got the 3 points.
Yeah.
We were awarded another dubious penalty against Gillingham, which has ended up winning the game. And again, against Peterborough, we were dominated all game. We've escaped with a penalty. We picked up the 3 points. But if you look at Lincoln, you look at Peterborough, and look at Portsmouth recently. I know they didn't start particularly well, but they're winning games because they are playing very well. The service to the forwards is great. The forwards are thriving on that service, and the whole team is performing well. But almost every Sunderland game, when we seem to record a podcast, it's it seems harsh to say, but the negatives almost outweigh the positives in every kind of reaction to the game we have. There's always something we're not happy with in regards to the performance or the way the team's set up or substitutions. There's always something. But again, if you're picking up the results, I'm happy to,
Well, that's it. That's it exactly.
If we could win games like that every week, I'd be happy.
I think we all every single Sunderland fan will say we need more pace, we need more creativity. We could be doing this better, and we could be doing that better. But we're in League One. We're playing teams either at our level or what our class is. We should be beaten. I think you've got to stick with Parkinson for a while we're getting results. I wouldn't like to change it anyway at this stage in the season. I think that should wait. I think you should get at least till after January, see where we are before we judge them and take it from there, to be honest with you. But yeah, as long as we keep getting the 3 points, I don't think there's that many teams we need to be scared of, even with the way we're playing. I don't think we need to be scared of that many teams. But yeah, the lack of chances is the biggest concern for me, and the lack of pace. But we have got, like you said, we mentioned earlier on, we've got Diamond, Dan Neil. They could come in and do, sort of fill that void. But whether Phil Parkinson chooses to do that at any point remains to be seen.
Yeah. We will move into the player ratings for Sunderland yesterday, and obviously Lee Burge starting goal, and the still image of the goal that Ipswich scored. He was very close to his front post, and again, I don't think his positioning was great for the goal. It wasn't poor, but I think it could have been better. But this is always the hardest part of a podcast, the ratings. But 5 out of 10 for me, Lee Burge. Paul, for you?
Yeah, well, I did all my ratings yesterday on my channel. Granted, I was a bit drunk at the time, but I did give Lee Burge a 7. I thought maybe that is a little bit optimistic, but yeah, I thought he played quite well. He did. I don't think there was much he could have done with that goal. Maybe he had, like I said, stronger hand to try and get it around the post rather than onto the post. But yeah, I'll stick with a 7, I think.
Yeah, it's just quickly on the goal that Ipswich did score. Do you think, the Sunderland keeper Lee Burge, do you think he's, I said his position wasn't great. He was very close to his front post, and Lancaster's hit the ball across him where there's a large gap to aim for. Do you think it was more of a great finish, or do you think again the keeper should be doing better with that one?
No, I mean, I think, to be honest, the keeper probably will be a little bit disappointed with that one. I mean, it almost seemed to sort of catch him by surprise, whether he wasn't expecting Lancaster to have a shot from there. Sort of seemed to take a touch and then, just sort of set himself to shoot. But as you say, Burge seemed to be quite far across. I mean, I can't remember whether there was anybody obscuring his view, but it just seemed as if he kind of reacted to it late, and rather than getting a kind of full palm on it and turning it around the post for an easy save, he just sort of ended up spooning it into the the inside of the post. And yeah, so it did look obviously we'll take it, but it did look as if it was a kind of probably just a kind of League One quality goalkeeper trying to save a League One quality shot. Really, I think it's one of those that would have been saved at a higher level, but we've certainly conceded plenty of those, and I think it was just one of those where, as you say, he's probably be disappointed, but maybe I'm doing a kind of disservice to the sort of the quality of League One goalkeeping, because certainly I've seen plenty of goals scored in this division that we probably wouldn't have seen in the the Championship or the Premier League when we were there.
Yeah. Luke O'Nien started at wing back again. I think you could argue he was slightly out of position for the equalising goal, and there was times where he was a little bit wasteful in possession. But going forward, he was putting some good balls in, and he was linking the play quite well. So 6 out of 10 for me, Paul.
I've got O'Nien down as a 7. I know he's a fan's favourite. I'm a big fan of his. I just like watching him on the ball. I think he does a lot more good than bad, and against Ipswich he did there. So I've gone for the 7. I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. Conor McLaughlin started on the right of the back three, and I think he's played quite well in recent games, but yesterday I don't think he was as impressive as he has been. For the equalising goal, I think he should be the man to go out and close the space that Lancaster had, and he didn't. He stood off, and obviously the space that Lancaster had to get a shot off was paramount to the goal. But he was wasteful again, similar to O'Nien. He seemed wasteful in possession at times. His distribution wasn't excellent, so I think I gave him like 5 out of 10 again. Paul?
Yeah, you've basically hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I've given him. I've given him a 5, and for the same reasons. He's just, some of his passing was terrible. Give the ball away a few times, and could have done better for the goal. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for me.
Bailey Wright started in the centre of the back three, and I can't really remember him doing anything wrong. Again, you could say he should be closing the man down a little bit better for the equaliser, but I think that was more down to Conor McLaughlin. But I think Bailey Wright was solid throughout. Obviously, that was the only goal we conceded, and I think aerially he was quite impressive. And again, he likes that diagonal ball up to Gooch or up to Maguire. So I gave him a 7 out of 10 for yesterday's game, Paul.
Yeah, for me, all these results would be completely different if he wasn't in the squad. He makes a hell of a difference to that back line. He commands the box well, and I can see him shouting at the other defenders, telling them where to go. I love him. I think he's fantastic, and I'm over the moon that he's our captain. He gets an 8 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. Tom Flanagan was the other centre half, and I say it every podcast that I'm not his biggest fan, and the reason, he's not a bad defender, but the system we play, obviously you've got Bailey Wright, who's more than capable of playing the ball forward. You've normally got Jordan Willis on the right of the back three, who's more than capable of playing the ball forward. But Tom Flanagan, for what you would perceive as a professional footballer, his passing is atrocious. And, just for that reason, I think I gave him like a 5.5 out of 10 yesterday, Paul.
Well, on here I've got 7 out of 10. I can't remember why I give him 7 out of 10, but I can't remember him doing too much wrong, to be honest with you. I think out of defenders, I think McLaughlin was worse than him, so that's probably why I've given him a bit of a higher rating. I'll give him a 6 out of 10. I think.
I think there was a few too many snake bites involved last
Yeah,
night.
I definitely had a few.
Denver Hume, again, he's been one of our most impressive players so far this season. But again, yesterday, I don't think he offered as much to the team. And I think part of that is down to the fact, we're playing Ipswich. They are a good side, regardless what Ace says. But 6 out of 10 I gave him. I thought he got caught out defensively a couple of times, as, I think we're kind of used to seeing now. And I think it was last 5 minutes in the game, he sprinted the length of the pitch and put a decent ball in the box, but there was no one there. But yeah, 6 out of 10 for me, Paul.
Yeah, I do really like Hume. I like the way he's playing. He skinned. I can't remember the name of the player, but the Ipswich defender skinned him a few times. Got some good balls in the box, even if there was nobody often on the end of them. I was impressed with him. I've been impressed with him for the last few games. I've given him an 8.
Very optimistic in
Yeah.
these ratings. But Grant Ledbetter started in midfield, and obviously Ace, you'll remember him. I think it was about 8 years ago now he played for Ipswich, but he's got the winning goal yesterday, and I think before the penalty I'd had him down as a 7 out of 10, but I've upped it to an 8 because he has won the game. He was calm when he had the penalty, so I think he did his job well. 8 out of 10 for me, Paul.
Grant Ledbetter, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got him down as a 6, so obviously you're optimistic with Grant. Yeah, I do. I must admit, I do like having. I think he needed to have that break. He needed to have that game out. He was playing a lot of games, but he's come back and he was quality. He calms everything down, like you say, and he doesn't really give the ball away very often. The only thing I would prefer is a bit more attacking minded, but that's obviously not his role.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've given him a 6, but I tell you what, I'll give him 6.5. I'll up it.
That's good. I'm glad you've done that. Josh Scowen obviously played the first half before going off with injury, and he's a player that again gets mixed reactions on social media. Some fans hate him and some fans love him, and I think I'm one of the ones that loves him. I think he's our most forward-thinking midfielder, and without him I don't think we'd create much. I know we didn't actually create much with him in the team anyway, but without him I think we'd create even less. We saw against Gillingham he is the only midfielder who seems capable of kind of running past the halfway line. He gets into the box, and if he keeps playing games, keeps getting the chances, he will start getting the goals. But I think he was capable of more than he's shown last night. But 6 out of 10 for me, Paul.
Yeah, I've gone for a 6 as well. I'd much rather start with him ahead of Power. I think he is a bit more attack minded. Like you see, he is still lacking a few things. Obviously, he's having a few shots, but it's not going where it needs to go. So, yeah, I've given him a 6 out of 10, but I'll give his head a 9 out of 10.
He did take a bit of a blow in that first half, and
yeah, he did. Yeah,
I was surprised he didn't actually go straight down when he got hit, because I think it was about 30 seconds later, wasn't it? Obviously, he got off the wall and went down a little bit later. But
yeah, he could have had whiplash off that, definitely.
Lyndon Gooch started once again in the attacking role, and 8 minutes in we did get the goal, and it was his through ball that released Wyke, who showed us blistering pace to get through the defenders. But it was a great ball through. 6 out of 10 for me. I don't know if he did too much else throughout the game, but he's assisted the goal. Paul, for you?
Yeah, I was watching him quite a bit, and I thought he played really well. Some of the turns on the ball was good. He has got that bit of pace. And he wasn't giving it away as much as he has done in the past. I've given him a 7 out of 10.
Yeah. Chris Maguire, again, I said this on Sunday. I think he's one of the players in the team where, he can have 3 bad games, he can have 4 bad games, he can have 5 bad games. But for me, he's the player that you just can't afford to drop, obviously, if he's fit. Because I think he's the only player capable of, kind of creating something from nothing. Obviously, we've seen multiple times since he signed, give him the ball 30 yards out, and he's capable of scoring. Give him a free kick, he's capable of scoring, and I think he's the only player capable of doing that. But I don't think he offered too much in the first half. You know, some of his set pieces were good set pieces that we've just failed to get on the end of. But, you know, he was replaced in the second half pretty early on. But again, similar to Gooch, I've given him a 6 out of 10. Paul?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've said there. He's still not quite up to what he's capable of doing. On a good day, he's easily a 9 every game. If he played at his best every game, he would get a 9. But he wasn't quite with it yet. I still think he needs a bit more game time. I've got him down as 6.5.
Yeah. And the last player in the starting 11, obviously, was Charlie Wyke. And, you know, we touched on it earlier. There's some fans who don't think he should be starting. And, you know, at the start of the season where he was getting game time, you know, I was one of them. I don't think I've seen much, like up until this season, he hasn't offered anything. You know, he wasn't using his physicality as well as he has been recently. And more importantly, he wasn't getting the goals. But like I say, he's got 5 goals so far this season and he looks to have really improved. And, you know, for as long as he's continuing that run, he should be our starting striker. You know, I think he had a good chance in the second half to give us the lead at 1-1. That he's volleyed it way over the bar. But again, I think it's, you know, 6.5 out of 10. Paul?
Yeah, I've been very impressed with Wyke, the way he's changed things around and getting a lot of the fans on his side. He seems to be getting in positions that he never used to get in, like so he can receive the ball and have a crack. The goal he scored was a brilliant ball from Gooch, and he was calm and turned around and scored. So I actually give him an 8 out of 10. Maybe that was a bit optimistic, but I was happy with his performance.
Yeah. And Ace for you, obviously, again, it was a scruffy game, but was there any player from either side, really, that stood out to you as man of the match? And please do not say the referee.
No, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I didn't notice anyone for Sunderland do anything particularly, you know, sort of outstanding. I think, as you mentioned with Maguire, he's one of those players that, as you say, you know, he could go 15, 16 games without a goal and assist, but when he plays against you, you're absolutely convinced every time he gets the ball that a goal's coming or he's going to create something. But, you know, we're kind of relieved to see, you know, again last night that he didn't, you know, sort of hurt us in the manner that I'd feared he might do pre-match. But for me, I thought Teddy Bishop was probably the best player on the park. I mean, he's, you know, just one of these players. Every time he got the ball, he seemed to, you know, want to skip past 2 or 3 players and make something happen. And I think he was probably the only player on the pitch, you know, that kind of consistently did that. I think everybody else was, you know, kind of much of a muchness, really. You know, there wasn't a great deal of quality for me from either team, you know, sort of probably Bishop aside.
Yeah. And Paul, for you, either side of man of the match, if you had to pick one?
It's difficult. I haven't even thought about it, really. I would have, if I was to pick one, it would have to be one of me 8s. So I will go with Charlie Wyke for scoring the goal.
I think I went with Bailey Wright in the match report that I did. And again, I think him and Maguire are 2 of the most important players in the team, even when they're not having a particularly good game. But Wright was the man of the match for me. But our next 2 fixtures are cup games. Obviously, Mansfield on Saturday and Fleetwood on Tuesday in the Papa John's Trophy. I'll never get tired of saying that one. Briefly, Paul, was there any changes that you'd, you know, particularly like to see for the upcoming cup games? The likes of Diamond, likes of Neil, maybe?
Them 2 on the spot, definitely. I would have. If he hadn't been injured, I would like to have seen Kip York start as well.
Yeah.
But you've got to get Dan Neil and Neil Diamond out in these games and let us see what they can do. Obviously, it is against Mansfield Town. That's actually my hometown, believe it or not. I was born there. I was only there till I was 6 months old, so I don't really know much about it. But
Glorious supportive and following the
yeah, I moved to Washington when I was 6 months old, so I think you can let us off with that one. But yeah, it's definitely get the youngsters out. Anybody that seems to be playing well in the under 23s or whatever, give them some game time in these cups. To be honest with you, I'm not a massive fan. When we're in League One, the main focus should be just getting out of the league. I don't like us to lose games either, though, because I think winning games breeds winning. So get the youngsters out there, see what they can do. If we don't win, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Ipswich also play in the FA Cup on Saturday, I believe it is. I could be wrong on that one, but I believe it's Saturday. Ace, your predictions for that one?
Well, Portsmouth at home. I mean, I don't know if you shared our, you know, the slight kind of I say it's a sort of perverse optimism upon relegation, because I think that the way that you guys did it was quite spectacular. Back to back. You've probably got a slightly different perspective, but I think when we went down, it was sort of 20 years of stagnation in the Championship. We had a little run under Mick, who you know very well. But aside from that, it was just playing Reading and Derby every season, and sort of sitting around mid-table, and the football was atrocious. And there were two things, when we went down, that there were kind of silver linings. Nobody was happy to go down, but one of them was, at least we'll get to go to some new grounds that we haven't been to for a while, which is obviously going great at the moment. The second one was, the first chance to be in the FA Cup first round, in the minnows, from the 8th tiers, or the local sides, and we ended up getting Lincoln and Coventry last year, two of the best in our division, and this year we've been rewarded with Portsmouth, who have hit form at just the right time as well. And to make that even more unglamorous, it's about the 18th time we've played Portsmouth in the FA Cup in about 19 seasons. It just seems to be every year, apart from last year, we've played Portsmouth in the FA Cup, and generally they've beaten us in every single one as well. So I don't think we'll do too badly. I think it'll be a close game Saturday, but I think that the concern for me is with the injuries that we've got, and also the fact that we've now got Dazelle out. We've only got a couple of fit strikers. I think it's just a bit of a dangerous time to be playing Portsmouth, really, given that they're on form. But obviously it's a cup match, and you kind of never know. We haven't got the best record in the cup, but for some weird reason, I'm strangely positive that we might get a result. But I think that's more because there won't be a replay, and we might just be able to drag them to the lottery of penalties.
Yeah. Just briefly on Mick McCarthy, hasn't he just got a new job abroad somewhere?
Yeah, he has. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one for me. I know it's at Apoel, I think they were champions last season, weren't they? They're down in 10th in the division, but I mean, the issue we had, and I suppose you guys will have probably slightly different memories of Mick, but it was a bit weird, really, the 5 years that he spent, because for the first 2.5 years he was exactly what we needed, and he was absolutely superb. We were dogged, we were hard to beat, after being a bit of a pushover, and we would grind out wins that weren't attractive. But at that stage, when you've started the season with 7 points and it's in November and you're looking dead certs to go down and you finish comfortably mid-table, you'll take scrappy 1-0 wins at Birmingham, all day long. So the first couple of years it was great, and then at the point where we started to push on and we started getting in and around the top 6, the football didn't get any better, and we started with 8 defensive players at home to Rotherham, who didn't have a point away all season, and it was it's just absolutely tedious. So in the end, it was the right time for Mick to go. Unfortunately, we made the wrong appointment, and we are where we are now as a result. But I just don't kind of see the logic of a team that's expected to win titles, getting it off, because I think I can understand a team maybe in a foreign country that is got a small budget and needs everybody to get together, have a good team spirit, to be organised, to be hard to beat. A bit like probably with no disrespect to Ireland, how they are when they're in a group with Germany or Sweden or Denmark or whoever, but I think, for a team of I believe I read somewhere that they've won the Cypriot title more times than any other team. So with those sort of expectations, it does just seem a bit of a strange appointment, really. But, maybe a masterstroke, who knows? Yeah.
And Paul, just quickly, obviously a lot of fans prior to Parkinson arriving actually thought Mick McCarthy would have been a good fit for Sunderland. Do you think he's a manager you'd like to see back at Sunderland at one point?
I don't know. He was okay. The only thing I didn't really like, I think he was a bit too defensive as a manager for me. I do like somebody that's a bit more attack minded. But yeah, he did stop the goals from going in, and he, like he said, he had a good knack of getting us to grind out results when they were needed. So I don't know if it was just like a straight swap now. I'd rather stick with Parkinson, to be honest with you, as it stands. But yeah, I can't knock him, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, that is all we have time for tonight, and it's another podcast heavily based on refereeing decisions, and I think that will be the case for a while, certainly in League One. Ace, appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon.
You're welcome. Thanks very much.
What's turned into tonight now. Paul, likewise, good to have you back on.
Thanks very much, mate. Anytime. Appreciate it being invited on.
No worries. We will be back again at some point over the next week or so to discuss something with someone. I'm not sure if we will be talking about the Mansfield game in too much detail if we do, but we will wait and see. But until then, we will see you later.